is that Hasbro's making a new interpretation of the character that needed to jettison some weight, or else he would not be able to make it to Cybertron. Yes, we're going to talk about Astrotrain and all the different iterations of both the Chug version, the Masterpiece versions, and we're going to go into that for a lot of reasons. And I'm noticing in my comments that there's a lot of newer collectors that maybe don't know these exist for the Chug line already, don't know that they exist for the Masterpiece line already, and you know what? Maybe there's a handful on my list or that are not on my list, and you can put that in the comments. We're going to get started with this as soon as you press the like button, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and you are watching the Titanium Hanger. This is Mike, and I'm your host to take you through all things that are vintage to modern Star Wars, Transformers, video games, and other things. So let's get right into this. So it all started with the G1 Astrotrain figure, and I never actually had one as a kid. But now as an adult looking back at it, it's pretty G1. It's a brick and the legs slide down and open up. But it actually looked okay in all three modes. I wouldn't say it looked great in any mode, but it didn't look horrible in any mode either. It looked okay. You could kind of tell the train was a train, the jet was a jet. And I really feel like this newest Hasbro one pays a huge homage to the toy with a lot of great upgrades. Now in 2000, around the 2006 year, they came out with what was the classics. So we had the G1 original in 1985, 2006, so 21 years later, technically a year after the movie, because the movie happened in 2005, the 1986 movie, the year 2005. We got this classics one. Now, I wasn't very impressed with the classics one, but I do want to tell you that the terminology Chug, so this is where Chugs come from, it's classic, the Henkei, universe, and generations. It basically just means the Hasbro mainline figures. And then after Generations, they really don't use Generations anymore, but we stopped at Generations and just call Chug Chug. And everything else we add to it, Siege and Combiner Wars and all that stuff, that all falls as Chug too. But I've had a lot of questions about what is Chug. And well, technically, Classics is the beginning of Chug. It's not G1. G1's not considered a Chug. But Classics all the way to now. So 2006 to now. But this is the Astrotrain. The white one on the right is the one that was released in the US. And on the left is the Henkei version or the Japanese version. Now the Japanese version hits the animation model a whole lot better, as you can see right here. And with that, it's a better coloration, I guess you could say. But then again, we played with a toy that looked more like the US version, which is why they put the US version one out. Well, or at least that's my belief. Now in the classic line, it was a big update to articulation and all that great stuff. And it was a deluxe scale. So then when Titan Returns comes along, they give us a Voyager scale. So we get this Voyager scale version, and to me, it's a big improvement from the classics. I think it looks better than the classics and all of that fun, great stuff. And then they do the same thing and give us the Japanese repaint. And by then, I think they're not calling it Henkei when we're Titan Returns. I think they called it something else, Unite Warriors, or something along the lines of the Japanese names change. But I may be mistaken on that one. But anyhow you slice it, it's still a more tuned coloration to it with the exact same mold and no changes. And that's what they did for a while. And they actually gave you a better coloration to the Japanese release, but it cost almost twice as much. Now fast forward to today and what Hasbro's giving us. Now what Hasbro's giving us is, I think it looks good. Now we could sit here and pick this thing apart. For $50, the inside of the legs, from the lower legs to the thighs, are waffly and open, and they should have engineered a panel for that. The underneath of the forearms is wide open, and there should be a panel engineered for that, which is probably an additional 12 cents in plastic for all that. But we could do that, or we could say this is the best looking version they've given us, We may have to drop another like 13 bucks on an upgrade kit down the road if you're super into all that. But I think just standing on the shelf, looking in a semi-dynamic pose, it won't look that bad. Coloration-wise, I think it's a midpoint between what they've been doing with US and what they've been doing with the Japanese releases. So it's not super duper tune, but it's also not super toy. Now let's get into the Masterpiece version. And I think the first one was the Devil Star, or Evil Star. And the downside to it is it was a little shorter, because it should be, if you're looking at a 9-inch scale, it should be about a 10 to 11-inch figure based on the size. But I mean, at least it should be the same size as Prime. If it's the same price as MP10, 9.5 inches, I'd be fine with it. But really, it should be a little taller than Prime. It came in shorter than MP10, so it just didn't seem like it was the right size. But I think aesthetically it was a little bit closer. It was one of the closer options that we've had. And they did put it out in 2 color schemes, with the white toy color and the darker gray animation color. But it was, by all accounts, everyone said it's a bad toy. I never got my hands on it. I know they clearanced them out down to like $95, but I was kind of holding out for like a $60 price point, and I would have pulled the trigger just to fiddle with it, and I never saw that. And that is Devil Star, or Evil Star. Next up is the DX9's CHIGURH, and it's chugga, like a train. Chugga. And the thing about that is that it was the right size. You could tell what character it was, but he had a lot of, to me, he just didn't fit the bill. He just, like, he was off a bit. DX9 did a pretty good job with it. The transformation was a little weird, but it still works. But in the end, I actually own this figure. I owned it for a week, and I sold it while people were still clamoring to get it, because I knew there'd be a better one down the road. There's no way this would be the definitive version of Astrotrain. And I know a lot of people that love this character, love this figure. And that's great. You can love the figure all you want. It's not for me, it's not for my collection, and I would have rather had one of the other options just for aesthetically pleasing purposes. But he does the job, and he transforms fine. I actually had stability issues with mine, but maybe I transformed it wrong, who knows. So next one, this one might have missed a lot of radars, a lot of people's radars, but Fancy Cell. I don't know who that is, really, but they came out with this version of Astrotrain, and it really was, I think it wasn't any bigger than a Voyager figure, and so it really didn't scale Masterpiece-wise. I hear the quality was a little shoddy on it, but looking at it, I'm pleased with the aesthetic. If they would have made that big enough, I would have bought it in a heartbeat. Just looking at it, I'm thinking, man, that looks good. But I hear a lot of bad things about it. But I don't care. I don't care what bad things I heard about it. I would have bought that thing if it was 9 or 10 inches tall. But I think it's only 7 inches tall. So here's the size variation from it to the DX9's CHIGURH, which the CHIGURH is still, most people feel that's the best option that's currently available. And CHIGURH. But you see the size difference. It's because of the size. And I am a size junkie. And so I never bought the Fancy Cell or messed with it because it was just too small to be considered Masterpiece and way too expensive, like $135, way too expensive to be a Chug. Now, looking into the future, I get my crystal ball back out. And here is the FANSTOYS Thomas, the FT44, and I guarantee this is going to be the most definitive version of this character that we will see. Well, hey, maybe Takara comes out and beats him, but I doubt it. It looks good, it looks amazing. It actually looks a little like the Fancy Cell version, except maybe a little more mature. But I want to point something out. And what that is the new Hasbro one looks a lot like it in a way. Like the Hasbro one, the Siege one, if you look at it all over, they both look good. Now, what I like more about the one that's going to cost almost 3 times as much is it smoother. I'm not into the excessive line work that Siege is doing, even though Siege is doing great. They're great figures. Some of the line work's a bit excessive for me, and I would rather have the look of minimal line work, but not a completely smooth look like what FANSTOYS is doing. Versus this, you know, you really can't compare Masterpiece and Chug. I know that, but my mind thinks a certain way, and I'm thinking that I'm praising Hasbro by saying they're doing so good, and I'm hoping this thing is at least tall enough to be like Ultra Magna size. Now, there are some options that they're going to include. FANSTOYS is going to let you take the toy look with the little front fin, or the more animation accurate look, and that's going to not have that big wing on his chest. So it's a big deal, a big difference. And I like the fact that FANSTOYS includes stuff like that, of course, different faces and all that great stuff. And there isn't actually a painted sample yet because, well, this is nowhere near getting released. It may be 2 years till we see it, but here's one that a fan did, so that looks beautiful, so thank you. So I hope that was a little bit helpful to some of you. If I missed one, like this Just a Toys one, which if you're a Legends collector, maybe you could squeeze that into your Legends collection. Just a Toys did make a tiny one. I have that one. Mine was actually the white toy colors, not the gray. But if I missed any other, you know, major versions of Astrotrain over the years, feel free to let me know down below. And this is so newer collectors can read the comments and they can find, oh, well, that's cool too. And there's nothing more frustrating than trying to collect this stuff and not even knowing what to type in a search to look for to find it. Not even knowing how to search eBay to find Fancy Cell or whatever. Like and subscribe, and Titanium Hanger out.